Hi guys, this is Alex from Mason Lifestyle. I hope everybody is doing well. As I mentioned last week on my Battle of the Camp Shirts video, I asked if you guys wanted a sew along for this pattern, which is Butterick 6924, and some of you said yes. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi guys, so today we're working on Butterick 6924. I know it says R11744. That is if you purchase the pattern off the rack. Again, this is Butterick B6924. And this is a pattern by Palmer Pletsch. If you've never done a pattern by Palmer Pletsch, they do something called a tissue fitting, meaning you actually fit the garment without having to do a muslin by tissue fitting the pattern itself on yourself. And if you open the instructions, you will see a sheet like this. It will give you a lot of pointers on if you need to do a full bust adjustment, if you need to do a small bust adjustment, and if you need to do a sway back, if you need a little bit more room in your biceps, forward shoulder adjustments. So it pretty much goes into detail into many of these things, and these patterns explain this very well. I will say this pattern should be rated average, and I haven't checked to see if they have or have not, but it should be rated average. Actually, let me check. Is it rated? It is rated average. So if you are ready to learn a couple of new skills, we are going to start. Let me tell you about the pieces that you are going to need. And I already cut a lot of my fabric, but we're going to start with pattern piece number 1. And I am doing a view A, which has the long sleeves, but I'm going to be using the pockets from a view C. So keep that in mind. So this is pattern piece number 1, and you are gonna cut 2. You also have pattern piece number 2, and pattern piece number 2 is actually the interfacing piece for pattern piece number 1. So again, pattern piece number 1, it is your front. You're going to cut 2. Pattern piece number 2, you're going to cut 2 out of interfacing. You also have pattern piece number 5, and this is your back, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold. You also have pattern piece number 7, and you're going to cut 2 of fabric, and you're going to cut 1 of interfacing. You also have pattern piece number 8, and this is the neck facing. You're going to cut 2, and keep in mind on your grain line is on the bias, so make sure that once you cut this pattern piece that you do not move it a lot. You also have pattern piece number 10, and these are the cuffs. You're going to cut 2 of fabric, and you're going to cut 2 of interfacing. And I'm skipping around with the numbers. You're also going to need pattern piece number 6, and this is the yoke front and back, and you're going to cut 2. And you have 2 different types of sleeves. You have a short sleeve if you wanted to do a short sleeve, but I am going to be doing view A with the long sleeve, and that is pattern piece number 9, and you're going to cut 2. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do a pocket, so I'm going to go ahead and cut pocket number C, and I'm going to cut 1. You can cut 2 and put them at either side, but I just want to do 1 this time around. All right, guys, go ahead and cut your fabric. Pay attention to the grain line. I want to make sure that you go ahead and you interface your front for pattern piece number 1. You are also have to interface your collar. if you are doing the long sleeves, you also have to interface the cuffs. Lastly, do not forget to mark all your notches, all your dots, all of that on all of these pattern pieces. And it's really, really, really important that you do this, and you will really notice that we will really need all of these little notches and dots and triangles and all of that when we start doing the collar. So it's really important. If you are perhaps like me, you know what, I don't want to do that today. This is the pattern that you should, and don't skip that. So go ahead and do that now. So first things first, I want you to grab your pattern piece number 1. This is the front, and I want you to go ahead and stay stitch. If you notice, I did stay stitching from the shoulders all the way to the center front. The pattern has you going from one to the other. Just go ahead and start at the shoulders and meet at the center front. Again, this is for pattern piece number 1. Go ahead and do that now for both pattern pieces. Once you do that, I want you to go ahead and pin your darts for both pattern pieces number 1. And I want you to go ahead and take it to your machine and stitch in your darts. And remember, for your darts, you are going to start at the end, back stitch, and then sew all the way to that pointy end. But once you get to the end, I want to make sure that you do not back stitch. Again, start at the end, all the way to the front, and do not back stitch at the end, which is towards the apex. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to go ahead and stitch our darts. So we're going to start back stitch, and just go ahead and make sure you pull, cut your threads, and then go ahead and tie these by hand. Go ahead and do that for both. So I went ahead and did my darts, and I went ahead and pressed those down. I know that the pattern has you cutting the darts, but I don't want to have to finish that with a serge or anything like that. So I just went ahead and pressed my darts down. Now I'm going to put that off to the side, and I'm going to grab my pocket, and that is pattern piece number 15. And you have a fold line. And before I do that, I went ahead and interface that top piece that I'm going to fold. Sometimes it's just easier, and also with time that piece of fabric is not going to wear. So I want you to go ahead and fold right at the fold line, and that interfacing is helping me with that. And I also want you to fold this lip. I want you to fold that little lip 3/8 of an inch. Once you do that, I want you to stitch from the top to that little fold, and you're going to use a 5/8 inch seam allowance or 1.5 centimeter. You're going to do that on both sides. Again, stitch from the top to the lip, from the top to the lip on both sides, 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters. So I went ahead and stitched the top piece of my pocket. There it is, letting the camera focus on it. So now we are going to grab our little shears and just cut right here on both sides. Probably have to get these sharpened, but I want you to cut right there. And notice when I did the fold, I did not press any of that. Okay, so now I want you to grab your point turner and just poke out those corners. okay? And I want you to take this to your pressing station, and I want to make sure that you do a 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around, right? So go ahead and do a really nice 5/8 seam allowance all the way around. Grab your seam gauge and go ahead and do that. And once you do that, you're going to press. All right, guys, so I went ahead and folded in my pocket. That's the front and this is the back. And if you notice, I did not serge any part of my pocket. What I did do was I used my seam gauge and I measured 1.5 centimeters or 5/8, right? Seam allowance, and then I folded the seam allowance into itself. I want to do that so when I put my pocket on my shirt that there are no raw edges, obviously, because I will be washing this over time. So now I went ahead and folded the edges onto itself. So when I put it in the pocket, they are all encased. So now before you put this pocket on your shirt, I want you to make sure that you do some stop stitching where we folded. So go ahead and do top stitching right there. And I usually just try to grab my seam gauge, and it looks like that is 1 inch. So I will probably top stitch at like 7/8. All right, so go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and top stitch your pocket. So I went ahead and top stitched my pocket. And now I have 2 dots on the front pattern piece, and it says, let me show you, it's right there, okay? The placement lines on the pattern are for the flap for A, but I'm doing a view C for the pocket, right? So once you have those 2 little dots right there, and they're at a very slight angle, and I want you to edge stitch your pockets in all the way, right? Start at one corner, come down, take your time. Remember, we're not in a race. I want you to also, once you're done and you get to the top, I want you to do 1, 2 stitches and then start coming down at an angle towards the full line. So again, I want to go ahead for you to edge stitch your pockets in. When you are at the top, I want you to do 2 stitches and you come. All right, I went ahead and stitched my pocket in. So now I'm going to put this off to the side, and I am going to grab piece number 5, and this is my back. And we have some pleats, and I'm going to do pleats for this. Let's say you had a very flowy, drapey fabric, then I perhaps would say go ahead and do gathers. But I'm going to do pleats, and I'm going to match my 2 pleat points, and I'm going to stitch 1.5 inches from the top. How do I know? The pattern told me. So I'm going to stitch just straight from the top, and I see my dot right there. That's 1.5 inches. Go ahead and do that for both pleats. You have 1 on the right and 1 on the left hand side. Going to match those in. There's my other dot for my other pleat, and that's 1.5 inches. So go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and stitch in your pleats. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch my pleat. There's where I need to be. So just don't forget to lock in your stitches. And you do have to lock in your stitches at the start and at the end for your pleats. So go ahead and do both pleats. So I went ahead and put my pleats. I also pressed them and I basted them, all right? Just because I want to make sure that that is not shifting on me once I start working on the next step, which is I want you to grab piece number 6. This is your yoke, and you are going to be working from the right side, and you have 2 notches right here. So I want you to make sure that you match those. And I want you to go ahead and take this to your sewing machine, and then you baste this in. Yes, that you baste this in at 5/8 inch seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. This is your back yoke. So I went ahead and attached my outside yoke. Looks great. Now I want you to grab your inside yoke. And same thing, I want you to match those double notches. I want you to pin, and I want you to stitch 5/8 or 1.5 centimeter. Don't forget to lock in your stitches at the start and all the way to the end. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and attached my back yoke and my inside yoke, and now you see all these seams. The pattern's asking you to go ahead and grade your seams. So just grab your shears. You have 3 layers of seams right there. So you really want to start grading those. So each one at a time, right? And you want to make sure that you do this. So once we're done grading our seams, we're going to press our yoke all the way to the top, and we're going to top stitch. So we don't really want to have like a big bulk of fabric right there. It's just not going to look great. So you really want to make sure that you grade those seams. So go ahead and do that now. Grade your seams. Once you do that, I want you to press your yokes towards the top, right? By basting stitches. You can take those out. I want you to press your seams up, and I want you to edge stitch right there. All right, go ahead and do that. All right, so I went ahead and edge stitch my yokes. So now I want you to move that inside yoke out of the way, and I want you to grab your front pieces, and I want you to attach them at the shoulder, and you have a notch right there. You have a notch right there. So go ahead and pin. And I want to make sure that you keep this out of the way. Do this for both sides. Again, keep that front facing out of the way when you are stitching this. I want you to take this to your sewing machine, and I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end to lock in your stitches. Again, 5/8 inch seam allowance, 1.5 centimeters. Make sure that you keep this out of the way. Okay, so I attach my shoulders, and the inside yoke is loose, okay? Now I want you to go ahead and lay your shirt right side up, and I want you to roll this back piece, and notice how that yoke, that back yoke comes out, and keep this fronting loose. And we are also going to roll this way, and you are going to pin right there. This is what it's called, the burrito method. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. Make sure that nothing is catching inside. All right, so now I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance or 1.5 centimeters, just the same way. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. And again, make sure that none of this other fabric that we have is catching. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and stitched those shoulders, and just go ahead and pull your shirt from the outside. And what you have is you have your inside yoke really nicely stitched in. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a really good press. Once I'm there, I'm also going to go ahead and baste the side yokes, and also I'm going to stay stitch the back of the yoke because we're going to be working on that area for the collar. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and stay stitch the back of my yoke, and also I basted the sides just that when we are attaching the sleeves, that is just not moving since there's 2 pieces of fabric there. Now I want you to stitch the sides of your shirt, and something really important, we have been using a seam allowance of 5/8 throughout. So you have a seam allowance of 1 inch on the side of your shirt. Okay, again, I'm going to repeat that. You have a seam allowance of 1 inch on the sides of your shirt. So go ahead with the right sides together. Go ahead and pin. And of course, you have 1 inch in case you need to adjust, which is very nice. If you wanted to even do French seams for this, you can, but I always like to baste and try it on and all that good stuff. So again, we have 1 inch seam allowance or 2.5 centimeters seam allowance on the sides of our shirt. So go ahead and stitch 1 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end for both sides, left and right. Go ahead and do that now. All right, I went ahead and stitched my sides, and I trimmed them the 1/2 inch, and I serged them, and I also pressed them towards the back. So, and of course, before I did all of that, I basted my side seams. I tried on my shirt. I have some ease, which is actually fine with me because this is going to be a long sleeve shirt. So if I wanted to roll it up, wear it with perhaps maybe even like a tank top under it, I can. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit more room. So now I want you to put this off to the side. And I want you to grab your collar. And remember when I told you to make sure that all of these dots, notches, all of that you mark everything. This is that moment. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do that. Remember, you also have the interface one. Go ahead and do that now. Make sure that you have all of these little dots, notches, the whole thing, because they are really important right off the bat. Go ahead and do that. All right, guys. So I have my uninterfaced collar, okay? And I have my cutting mat because we are going to cut. So the pattern's asking you to cut from the top edge to the bottom, and it wants you to cut at the top 1/8. So again, your sewing gauge, that's 1/8. I'm gonna put it closer, 1/8, right? So that's that. That's what I have on my ruler. And again, 1/8 at the top and pretty much down to 0. I want you to do that on both sides, okay? Both sides. Again, 1/8. And it's just a little bit, okay? Once you do that, I want you to grab your interface piece, and I want you to, with right sides together, I want you to pin. And I want you to stitch 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter at the bottom, the straight edge, okay? Don't forget the back stitch at the start and at the end. Go ahead and do that. I went ahead and stitched my upper and under color, and now we have to trim, okay? So this is the under color, the one that's on interface, and this is the upper color. So we are going to trim this seam allowance 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters, right? So grab your ruler once again. So 1/4 inch, right? And guys, just go slow. Just go slow. Okay, so we went ahead and cut that. And now I want you to trim your upper color. I want you to trim that 3/8, okay? That is right there. So essentially we're grading our seams. Okay. So this is what it looks like. Okay, so there it is. I graded my seams. Now I want you to put that off to the side. Now I want you to turn this over, and we are going to understitch, and we are going to understitch the seam allowance towards the undercolor, which is the interface 1, okay? Again, if you can see it, interface on interface, I am going to understitch, which means I'm going to take my collar and upper collar to the sewing machine, and I'm going to put my seam allowance towards the upper color, and I am going to stitch really close to the seam allowance, because when we close all of this, right, I want to make sure that it's rolling towards that side. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I am understitching, right? So I have my seam allowance that we just graded, and it's going towards the side that's uninterfaced, and I'm trying to get as close to the seam as possible without going into the seam. Don't forget the back stitch. All right, so I went ahead and understitched. That's what it looks like. And this is what it looks like from the back, okay? So the seam allowance is towards the uninterfaced collar, okay? So now I want you to, with right sides together, and I want you to match these sides. Remember how we trim the sides? So go ahead and pin the sides. Don't worry about the top piece. Just worry about these sides. Okay, you want those two edges to be pretty much meeting each other. And I want you to stitch 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end, which will be here. Okay, do that for both sides. Now I want you to cut the corners, okay, because we're gonna turn this and we don't want a ton of fabric pulling over there. So do that for both sides, and remember, do not cut through your stitches that you just made. Okay, and I also went ahead and trim the sides. Turn your collar, right? And I like to use my little point turner. I may need to trim some more of those corners. Yes, hold on. I still got a little bit too much pulling over there. There it is, my little pointy collar. I'm gonna do that on this side. So once you turn your collar, just give it a really good press. Gave my collar a really good press, and I also trimmed a little more on the sides. So guys, now I want you to go ahead and baste down here. Just baste, because we are going to be working on attaching the collar to the shirt. So we want to make sure that these are two pieces of fabric and that they're not moving and they are behaving like one. So go ahead and baste this area down. Basted my that open edge for the color. So now I want you to grab your shirt, right? And remember that I told you to stay stitch. If you haven't, go back to your sewing machine and get that done, because we're going to be working on this area and we do not want this to stretch on us. So make sure that you have that stay stitched in there, and also your that front piece, okay? And if you did all those notches, which I told you to do, they're all gonna make sense now. So again, if you didn't do those notches, I don't know what to tell you. Anyhow, so I want you to match that notch right there, right? Go ahead and pin. And if you're asking which one goes up, which one goes down, so you want to make sure that your interfaced collar is going up, okay? So find my other notch right there. You are going to pin. So I want you to pin your collar. Just pay attention to all those notches and whatnot. And I want you to base this in, okay? Again, I want you to base this in. It's like I have a pucker there. I want you to base this in 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter. Start from end all the way to the other end, okay? And you are going to have to stop, adjust your color, and go back again. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and baste my color in. I am using a stitch, straight stitch, 5mm. I'm not locking my stitches, I'm just basting this in. And I'm gonna go from edge to edge. You may have to stop and adjust. And when I'm stopping, I'm just making sure that I have no puckers underneath. So that is what that looks like, and it looks like I have a pucker right there. See it? I'm gonna have to go ahead and unpick that and go back and ease it in. So go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and baste your color in it using 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter. All right, so I attached my color, and like I told you guys, if you have any puckers, if you're done and you have any puckers, just go back in there and pull out a couple of stitches and just go ahead and ease it in. You really want to make sure that you have no puckers, right, in the back of your shirt. All right, so now I want you to grab these flaps that have been around for quite some time, and you have a notch, and I want you to match it with that notch right there. Right, I want you to almost like pin right there. Don't worry about pressing any of this right now, okay? And your color is going to be down here because it's all going to be almost like sandwiched in. So we want to make sure that this little piece at the top is meeting that seam allowance for our yoke, because we are going to stitch this later on, right? So go ahead and pin that down. Okay, don't worry about that now. Just want to make sure that I'm going to make sure that I pin my color over here. Which is moving a little bit on me. And I want to make sure that all those raw edges are together. And it just almost folds. If you have the notch in the right location, it folds right where that interfacing that you put in. Okay. Lots of pins. And again, making sure that my collar is straight down there, and that I'm folding this. And guys, I also finished this raw edge. You can fold it into itself if you wanted to, but I'm trying not to have any bulk on my shirt. So again, we're folding all of that in. So go ahead and fold those pieces, find your notches and start there. And then these pieces, make sure you fold. You really want to make sure that they are meeting that seam right there. So when we stitch all of this, that is meeting that seam, because later on we're going to hand stitch that in. Go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and, all right, so we pin this in. Now I want you to grab piece number 8. This is your neck facing. Remember, it's caught on the bias, and I want you to press it wrong sides together. Okay, and remember, it's caught on the bias, so it's going to stretch on your lie slightly, but you see those dots? Remember that I told you all those dots? Try to match those, and it is going to stretch with you ever so slightly, and it's going to extend past this. Just go ahead and put raw edge to raw edge. All right, now I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance from one end all the way to the other end. Go slow. Just like I did the collar, you're going to have to adjust. If it's easier to baste all of this in first, go ahead and do that. But I want you to go ahead and stitch 5/8, 1.5 centimeters from end to end. Don't forget to lock in your stitches. Go ahead and do that. So I went ahead and stitched all of that in. And guys, now I want you to go ahead and cut right here at an angle on both sides. I want you to, of course, poke out your corners, right? If you have any basting stitches, I want you to take all of that away. And then you have all of these layers of fabric right here. And the pattern's asking you to grab your scissors and just cut almost at like a sideways angle. To cut all of that, because you're going to grab this piece, right? And you have to clip all of this almost at an angle, because you're going to obviously do that, right? Do all of that, right? You're poking all of this out, and you are going to hand stitch all of that. Yes, all of that you're going to hand stitch, right? It's gonna take me a while, but you really want to trim this whole piece, and then you are going to slip stitch this entire thing, okay? Do not stitch in the ditch. That would be the lazy thing to do. And I guess you can. If you want to just stitch in the ditch, go right ahead. But if you stitch in the ditch, this facing, you're gonna have stitches back there. So you really want to just trim all of this, right? Fold, you're facing in. And then remember this, we are also going to slip stitch. So this is all going to look clean, right? This whole area that you're poking out, your corner right there, it's all gonna look clean. And then you will have a finished collar, okay? So go ahead and do that now. It's going to take you a while. Again, clip your corners on both sides, trim all of this, right? The entire thing. You're gonna have to trim it in different lengths. So when you roll the facing in, it's all tucked in there. If you have any basting stitches, pull those out, and then you're going to slip stitch. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. We are still not done. We still have the sleeves, placket, and hem to do, and that will be coming pretty soon in another video, which will be my next one because I want to finish this shirt momentarily, if not within the next couple of days. But I wanted to start the video, and I will, of course, link them both. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. As always, I will go ahead and put all the information on my blog on what adjustments I had to do on the pattern and whatnot. And I will see you next week. Bye.